Morning, Charlie, Don and Teresa. Okay, got the thumbs up. Good morning, everyone. We are broadcasting from Houston, Texas. It is Sunday, September 4th. And it's Labor Day weekend. And this particular first Sunday, I'm giving a talk which I'm entitling Attention, Entertainment, and Listening. So this fall, we are beginning a series of teachings where we're going to be looking at the sutras. The title of the course is called The Sutra Heritage, Inspiration for Everyone. And we're looking at the sutra teachings, the Indian Buddhist teachings that are resonant with and supportive of the teachings that are later in Tibet called the foundational practices. And a text that we will ultimately be touching into in January, when we teach a course on the foundational practices. It's called Lamp Lighting the Path. And one of the first things it talks about in that text is listening. Listening to teachings. And as I was thinking about preparing for this talk, I happened to read an editorial in the New York Times a few weeks ago, written by Ezra Klein, who we used to watch on TV. And I've put the URL for that in the chat. It's entitled something, Unfortunately, the Media is the Message. So the article looks at the issue of attention and how attention is being shaped by our interaction with media today. And I'm thinking as I read this and as I share this with you all, that there are many ways in which our Buddhist practice is a very, very serious antidote and a very, very proactive antidote to forces that are at work in our involvement with media. And so I just want to think out loud about that. You know, one of the things that Ezra Klein says in the article, and it's just a kind of aside, is that when people lived in an oral culture, they related to things differently. And then when people lived in a print culture, they related to things differently. And now we're living in, there was a TV era, and now we're in a social media era. And these all involve the transmission of information in a very, very different way. So one of the things that you'll notice if you tune in to our first and third Tuesdays and we start reading some sutras, the sutras are really written down portrayals of what was an oral tradition and an oral transmission. And there's an enormous amount of repetition. They don't sound like modern narratives at all. They have a very different cadence, a very, very different rhythm. And the way information is held orally and transmitted orally is very, very different from when it's just initially written. So with each medium that starts becoming the predominant medium in a culture, there are things that are occurring to our attention that are worth paying attention to. The two things that I took away from Klein's article is that with the current mode of media, whether it be TV or social media, the two predominant issues with TV and social media is TV is the word is entertainment. And with social media, it's social approval. So with television, everything becomes homogenized to an entertainment rubric. And he interestingly points out that there's been an incredible meld of entertainment and politics in our modern cultures. And this is not just in the United States, but including the Ukraine. So we had Ronald Reagan, who was really initially a television star. We had Donald Trump, who was initially a television star. And not everybody knows that Zelensky from Ukraine actually starred in a TV series where he played a president of the Ukraine. I think he starts off as a school teacher and then he becomes the president of Ukraine. So entertainment and politics have just seamlessly melded in a very, very strange manner. Entertainment is a kind of an interesting word, and I'm tempted to think that it's a bit like music for the soul. And I share something about what's going on in China, which is very, very interesting, speaking about entertainment. There is a Buddhist theme park in China, which the government supports. Now, in general, the Chinese government has been very, very, very controlling of religion, and especially Buddhism. But they sponsor a theme park. And even on the ferry going over to the theme park, the Buddhist theme park, they're instructing people on how to bow down at a Buddhist temple. But think about what occurs at a theme park. You know, you go there, you spend the afternoon, you have your picnic, you see some things, you get entertained, you have a little diversion. You don't take anything very, very seriously. In Buddhist teachings, they'll often talk about near and distant enemies. So, you know, like, what would be a handy example? So,
no worries.
You know, a far enemy to, let's say, dirt would be like Clorox, where you're cleaning something up. You really clean something up. A near enemy to dirt might be like dust. It's, you know, it's vague and it's faint, but it's really kind of hard to deal with. And it's very, very close to clean, but dust, you know, it's an obstacle. A far enemy to religion would be complete ban. But a near enemy to religion is making it entertainment, making religion into entertainment. I won't really go into social media, but the whole issue with social media is that everything is being pursued in terms of how many people like what you post. So part of what happens with these media is that they actually start creating an imprint as to what we can take in as information. So Klein quotes an author named Postman, who seems to appear in a book called The Paradox of Democracy. And Postman says, don't just look at the way things are being expressed, look at how the way things are expressed determines what's actually expressible. In other words, the medium blocks certain messages. So our orientation towards social media and television entertainment makes us oriented towards certain kinds of levels of engagement, ways of being with ourselves, ways of being with others. You know, we may develop a 15-minute, 30-minute, 45-minute attention span or a 30-second attention span. And anything that demands anything more than us, from us, is hard for us to do. Anything that goes out of the entertainment rubric may be hard or challenging for us to experience. You know, when it first came out, I was struck by Dzongtsar Khyentse Rinpoche has a book on the foundational practices, and it's called Not for Happiness. What an interesting and kind of provocative title for a book. But thinking about it in terms of this framework about entertainment and social media, he's hitting a very, very important chord, and that is religious involvement is not necessarily for immediate happiness. It is the case that our involvement with spiritual practices towards a very, very ultimate kind of satisfaction, a very, very ultimate kind of happiness. But it's not for the immediate hedonic satisfaction of just a kind of a laugh, a feel good, a temporary feel good, a temporary like on a Facebook page. It's really something very, very ongoing, requires patience, involvement, engagement, and ups and downs, and a larger frame than just momentary satisfaction. There's a really different orientation when we are moving out of the frame of being involved with media, when we turn towards religious practice. We all in the modern world live in what can be described as a kind of predominance of an external gaze. We're looking externally, we're looking outside for satisfaction, for happiness, for something to pass our time, to entertain us. And with religious practice, we are ultimately, especially in Buddhism, we're looking internally. We're looking at what is happening inside. What is the nature of our mind? What's the nature of our experience right now? What's our ability to be with ourselves? So Klein quotes an author named Jenny Odell, who wrote a book with a wonderful title called How to Do Nothing, Resisting the Attention Economy. So part of what she's talking about in terms of an attention economy is that all of social media and TV, they're all grabbing our attention and engaging our attention and shaping our attention in terms of what we can take in as significant and expressible. So she says in that book, when you spend enough time with someone who pays close attention to something, or if you're hanging out with me, it would be birds, you inevitably start to pay attention to some of the same things. I've also learned that patterns of attention, what we choose to notice and what we do not, are how we render reality for ourselves, and thus have a direct bearing on what we feel is possible at any given time. These aspects taken together suggest to me the revolutionary potential of taking back our attention. So what we are doing when we practice is we are taking back our attention. We're really doing something very, very radical in terms of how we are being in the world. You know, when I reflect on my own life, I learned ways of being and ways of entertaining myself from my father. And my father always had a book or a radio very, very close to him. And I notice when I get into the car, I'll automatically kind of turn on my radio. It's just my way of being, which I learned from my father. And when I go to practice meditation, or if I just sit by myself, I notice these impulses to want to turn to something external, want to find something in my ear, to listen to something like my father listened to his radio, or I want to pick up a book. I myself don't happen to be that oriented towards social media, but you know, certainly I like to look at the news on my phone. It's very, very definitely an act of attentional shift for me to turn my attention internally and to actually start looking at the particularities of my experience. And between what I've learned in psychotherapy, which alerts me to be attentive to emotions in ways that I didn't come to naturally, and within Buddhist practice, the way I've learned how to be attentive to what's going on in my mind and my attention very, very carefully, I've had an opportunity to find a whole new way of being with my experience. It allows me to be with myself. It allows me to find meaning and richness in the moment that, you know, as I'm just swimming along with the cultural tide, my natural inclination is, oh, satisfaction and meaning are in the next news report or in my phone. And I feel those tugs and I express them and live them out on occasion. But there's a whole other mode of being when I just allow myself to be in my experience and allow myself to be with what's coming up in a very, very spacious and open manner. And so this is what we train with when we practice our meditation. that we'll do, in a few minutes. We're training ourselves, both turning away from all the ordinary tugs, the TV media, the social media, the news, even the printed media. We're beginning to pay attention to our own experience. And within that training, it's not only what we are attending to, and we are attending to the nature of our experience, our breath. We notice that thoughts and feelings come and go. But it's the how we are paying attention. We learned that we can begin to train our mind in a kind of even, open, spacious, accepting, loving attitude towards our experience. It's not necessarily what we are doing in our culture with ourselves in general. Often in our culture, what we're trained to do is to be frenetic, to be multitasking, to be thinking about many things at the same time and doing one thing and thinking about another thing. And our orientation then is scattered and focused and tense. And within meditation, we are learning to quiet our attention. And in a way, we start working with two different skills progressively. One is to be able to quiet and sustain and accept focus. And then we move into further layers of practice. We learn how to let be, to be open, to be spacious, and just kind, relaxed, and let what occurs occur, and be more in touch with the natural clarity, peacefulness, and compassion, the true nature of our mind. It's a very, very different attentional mode that we're learning when we practice meditation. And as the author said, when we hang out with people who are cultivating a certain kind of attention, there is a kind of rub-off effect. In the tradition, they'll often talk about transmission. Transmission means that when we are with our teachers, when we're with the lineage, when we imagine our spiritual teacher, we're touching into their nature, their attentional nature. And we're allowing our own attentional nature to be affected by their attentional nature. It's a very, very mysterious process. One that's a bit akin to tuning a radio to a channel. In the old days, we don't do it nowadays because everything's digital. You had to find the channel and you had to just kind of keep wiggling the knob until you sort of zeroed in on the specific channel, and then you would hear the radio channel very, very clearly. You had to tune the dial. And part of our attentional training is being in community, being with teachers, and allowing ourselves to be affected by the attentional posture of our colleagues and our teachers in a way that allows our attention to move into a much more settled, calmer, focused, open, receptive capacity. So we have several pieces to this morning. We have our morning teaching, and we're going to have meditation starting at 11. And then at 12 noon, we will have a Dharma conversation. And so I'm going to allow us all, to, if we need, to have a little bit of a 5-minute break. Anne will lead the meditation this morning, and then I will return at 12 noon Central Time to do the Dharma conversation, where we'll look at the whole issue of attention and modes of attention. So we'll be back at 11.